The odds are already out for next season's national championship winner. And they came out right after the game. They've adjusted just a little bit. Georgia obviously knocking out Alabama 33-18 uh, last Monday night in Indianapolis. And will those two teams play again for the national championship? If you're looking at odds from our friends in the desert, they think they will. And we are still a little bit of ways away from understanding what both of these teams will have in terms of what Alabama and Georgia will have coming into 2022, because the transfer portal and their 2022 classes and recruiting will have some effect on both of their trajectories. We know that Alabama will have Will Anderson. We know that they'll also have Bryce Young. Very good players, two of the best players in college football, just period. And I think that taking that into account, Alabama, just leaving Indianapolis, I mean, Alabama should have been considered the favorite. They were tied with Georgia for a while as the odds-on favorite to win the national championship in 2023. Now they've inched slightly ahead of Georgia, and I have to say that I think that's the right call. I mean, Alabama should be favored to win the national championship. If they're not favored next year, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know. But hey, look, before we even get started on 2022, let's talk about 2021. Make sure you're getting DAWGSTRUCTION. We're getting the amount of orders is very flattering for sure, and I know that y'all want to commemorate Georgia's big win over the Tide, the 33-18. I hope I'm getting that score right. I'm gonna concentrate on scores. I concentrate on results, but we'll concentrate on getting you the book in probably late February, early March. It will depend a little bit on some shipping stuff that's going on, but we've got a new cover that's going to come out very soon. I'm going to show y'all. I think everybody will be happy with it, and it'll probably make more people want to get it. But this is not a book that you're just going to be able to go out and get. So make sure you order it right down below as we talk about the Dogs heading into the 2020 season, which will be here quicker, 2022 season, which will be here quicker than you might think. A couple of other teams just kind of listed. I mean, it's the usual suspects. Alabama at plus 200, Georgia at plus 250, Ohio State at plus 600. So they are both, uh, you know, considerably favored more than the Buckeyes. The difference, I think, is that those two will play one another. The curious thing, Alabama, Georgia. The curious thing from here on out is going to be what happens when Georgia and Alabama get to the SEC championship undefeated. Do they just waltz right in? I think they might. I think a two-loss SEC champion, we've never seen that person get in, but right now Las Vegas views it as Georgia and Alabama eating up more than 50% of the likelihood of winning next season, and about 60% almost, or a little higher than 60%. Ohio State at 600. I should mention Alabama's at 33% probability to win, Georgia at 28, Ohio State's at around 14, and then Clemson's around 7-ish, maybe 8%, and that's reflective of their schedule, I would say, more than anything else. And then there's a big fall backwards to Michigan, who's at 3,500. In other words, nobody's close to those five groups. I got to tell you, I think the Clemson is a sucker bet. I would not put any money on them for the 2022 season. There's just too much going on. They don't have a lot in their way, but they didn't have a lot in their way outside the Georgia game this season, and they kind of fell on their face a little bit. You play Tech to open the season, and there's some gimme games, but they got to go to Notre Dame. I don't think they win that game. I'm just going to tell you right now. And then we'll see how much better Miami is. There's some people that think NC State is a top 10 team. We'll see. It's getting harder for Clemson because they're regressing some. And the ACC had nowhere to go but up. But there are some tricky games on here a little bit, but none more than Notre Dame. If they're favored in that game, I'd be a little bit surprised. They lost the last time they went up there with DJ Ugalele, And this time, I don't know, but Oregon is sitting there at plus 5,000. That's the team Georgia opens up with. That's probably one reason why they're not as high. Clemson not playing Georgia this season obviously has something to do with it. Alabama, Georgia State, Georgia, and Ohio State, they don't play a massive, massive game inside the regular season. Obviously, Michigan for Ohio State, but Ohio State's going to be a considerable favorite in that game. That game will be in the horseshoe this year, if I'm not mistaken. So I think, to me, at first, and even still having Georgia that high is a little bit, I don't know. Um, I think Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama are the three premier programs in the country right now. I'm not sure I buy that Georgia's as close to Alabama as the odds makers have them. Um, but hey, look, and if it's about getting into a two-game scenario where you got to win the right game and lose the right one, yeah, then it makes sense that Georgia would be at 250. I do not think that either of those teams will sweep the other in the coming seasons. Maybe, but doesn't feel like that because with the way that Georgia pressured Bryce Young this past game, I mean, the statistics show that they pressured him almost 30 times with quarterback hurries. I mean, that's just not an acceptable um, production from Alabama's offensive line. And guess who didn't give up a single hurry? Georgia's offensive line. Now, I know they're different teams. I get that. They will be different teams. Alabama will be a different team, too. They're going to have to run the ball better than they did against Georgia. They did not do an effective job of that. They just weren't great. I mean, Georgia really shut them down. And you do have to wonder if there are lingering effects from that in another season. We're talking about 13 games from now. We're talking about 40, probably 40 or 45 weeks from now of those two teams playing one another. And Georgia has a real challenge on its hand immediately out of the gate playing Oregon. But I did notice that. I mean, and listen, Georgia and Alabama are going to be compared against one another for a while. I mean, if Alabama wins the national championship in 2022, they will continue to compare Georgia and Alabama. Why? Because they are the most recent national champions, and LSU is sort of has got some changes that have happened. Most notably their head coach. But for Bama, you know, averaging 1.1 yards a rush. I mean, you'd think they'd be able to run a little bit better than that a season from now, but I mean, that was rough. That was rough. 30 carries. I mean, excuse me, 28 attempts and 30 yards. It's just not enough. They only got 5 first downs from rushing the ball, which means the whole time they were having to try to throw the ball. And once you know that, it becomes really tough. I mean, Bryce Young dropped back 57 times. Well, he threw it 57 times. He was sacked 4 times. So that means he dropped back over 60 times. It's just not the way it's not a formula to beat Georgia. And by the way, go back and look. You know, about half the time, Alabama quarterbacks have a real hard time with Kirby Smart. I mean, you go with Jalen in the first half of the national championship game in '07 and '17, excuse me. The second half with Tua, those were not great numbers. The numbers in 2018 from Tua were not good numbers. Mac Jones had a great game against Georgia. Bryce Young had a superb game against Georgia, and then he didn't. So, I mean, I don't think he had a horrible game against Georgia. It's 35 for 57, 2 interceptions. One was a killer, and 360. Well, both were killers. 369 yards. I mean, that's not a bad game, but that's not what you want. I mean, that's not what you want. You need some help from the offensive line and the running backs. Bryce Young's not gonna be able to do it by himself. But about half the time, Georgia's stopping Alabama quarterbacks. Heisman Trophy level Alabama quarterbacks. So I just I don't know. I mean, I think that Kirby understands how to do things. There's going to be a lot of turnover, but when I saw that the two teams were lined up about even, and Alabama should be in front of Georgia in 22. I was a little surprised by that, but you just don't know what one year to the next will bring. Um, the other team that's just very high, and it may be because of alphabetical order, is Florida. I mean, Florida's at minus 5,000 or plus 5,000. They're in there with Utah, Oregon, Texas. I wouldn't bet on any of those teams. I mean, but certainly Florida. They got a long way to go and some real issues to get there. I don't know who their starting quarterback is. If it's Anthony Richardson, he's got a long way to go to develop. You're starting with a new coaching staff. It's a lot. I mean, it just is. And I'm not sure I buy that either. But I'm going to talk about this a lot because it's one of the curious things. I think Clemson is getting a gentleman's 1200. I think that and Michigan. I think if you're not betting on Alabama, Ohio State, or Georgia, you're kind of a sucker. That's what I would say. And I think that it's going to be like this for a while. How long? I don't know. I've talked long enough. Make sure that you're ordering the book like all of y'all have been. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you over on the website.